In 2022, Sarah, a Canadian, bought a home in Pitigliano, Tuscany, and moved there permanently. Today she sits down with us in her new Italian home to give us the whole story about how she made the move, the positives and negatives about her new life, the importance of learning Italian, and how she made it work financially.
Okay, so where I was at when I was living in Calgary, in Canada, was I had spent quite a lot of years as a professional actor, trying to kind of live this life as an artist in a place that I felt was really much more of an economically driven, sort of industrial minded place. So I had actually taken 2 months out of Canada and come to Italy to study Tuscan food history. And I met this amazing family in Florence, and I went to school in Florence every day, and I got to learn about how these dishes were created and obviously make them with my teacher and also live with a family there. So I really felt like I had found an amazing place. And during that time is exactly when the pandemic hit. So I had taken a train out of Florence and I'd gone towards Sicily, and everything was sort of shutting down as it followed me. And I got stuck in Sicily for a bit of extra time, and then got stuck for almost 3 weeks trying to get back to Canada. So when I arrived in Canada, it was full pandemic, full shutdown, and I was basically in isolation by myself in my apartment with no prospects of like theaters opening up or filming opening up anytime soon. So being in a place where you just come from something wonderful, where you felt at home, to going back to being completely alone with no career anymore, I think it just made sense. It's like, well, now what? Which I think was a question that everybody was asking. And I thought, well, I've spent my life dreaming about doing this. What's to stop me? So I just started researching. I just started saying, well, what do I have to do? And so you start on Google, you start on government websites, which in Italy is impossible to navigate. And then, of course, on things like social media. So on Facebook, I found How to Move to Italy, which then led me to Smart Move Italy, which then, of course, got me in contact with Samantha Wilson. And taking those classes, understanding what that process would be to go through all the paperwork, showed me the path. And I mean, she made it really easy. She made it really easy to make goals that were achievable. And she said something that I will never forget, which is, like, you're going to be afraid. This is going to be hard. And the difference between making this move and not making this move is whether you keep going or not. So tenacity. And I thought, okay, well, I've made some hard decisions in my life and I can do this. And so I just started. I made several trips back and forth, doing the paperwork, finding a place to be a resident, which luckily that family in Florence gave me a home until I was able to find my home. And 2 years later, almost to the day of when Sam said, make your goal to be that you will be here by then, it was like a week before that I signed the paperwork for this house and moved here. Wow. And so there you go. And it's still a little bit surreal. I'll be honest, it's still very like, are we sure that I'm not just on some sort of like work trip or like, I don't know, some sort of, I don't know, fantasy, but you know. Okay, so Italy specifically for me was something that started when I was very, very young. So I think I was probably born liking pasta without knowing it. Every birthday I would ask my mom to make me lasagnas and things that were from Italian food, so that was part of it. And then, of course, I think being an artist growing up in that way, you study things like the Renaissance and you study architecture and I had a book, The Architecture of Florence, and I would just pore over that. And then as my life became more about making food and understanding like the importance of good food, and I wanted to get closer to that. And it's something that I think we have in common everywhere in the world, but if you're talking about places that are like the mecca of food culture, I'm sure that Italy would be on the top of most people's lists, or at least one of the top. And so I came here and I first went to places like Rome and saw the touristy areas and Venice and things like that. And I never went to Florence. And then I would say 2019, I just decided my life had changed. I got divorced. I was like, what should I do now for myself? And I went to Florence, and I finally felt the rhythm of a place that felt like home. And it was like, the words can't describe how that feels. I think people who do this understand that in your heart you feel it. So that started Tuscany, I think. But then I realized that obviously living in a city wasn't going to be for me. So I knew that I would have to move around and take a look at places. So I went back to Canada. You start looking online for where are some houses, where are some cute towns, et cetera, et cetera. And I did a big tour for almost a month in Umbria, in Lazio, and other parts of Tuscany. And what I had actually found was a house and also the area around Bolsena Lake, which is a beautiful, diverse place. And by looking at houses there, which is only 20 kilometers away, I had rented a place here. And so in order to come and stay here, I stumbled across it. And it was like arriving in a fantasy, in a fairyland. It had just rained, so like all the streets were glistening, all the lights were on. They light the town from outside, and the view when you come into town is amazing. And as I walked around, people were saying hi to everyone. They were standing in the street chatting. And all of these people were artists. There were people making things with their hands. There were ceramic artists and weavers and painters and jewelry artists. And it just seemed like my people, you know? And then when I started looking for houses, here is when I actually got to have one-on-one conversations. And that to me was the deciding factor. Because Bolsena was lovely, this area was lovely, but Pitigliano itself, the people and their ability to help you integrate into feeling like you can create a life here, I think was the big deciding factor. Cultural differences between Canadians and British people specifically, and Italians. I think Italians express themselves freely in a way that at first is a bit overwhelming for people who are used to being more closed, more reserved, but then is refreshing because it's almost like you can see that they have a wellness inside them because they let it out as opposed to keeping it bottled up. And so every day I'm trying a little bit more to learn to just sort of express it and then let it go, you know, which is healthy, I think. Obviously, spending a considerable amount of time making food and consuming food and talking about food. We say that like while we're having lunch, we're already planning what we're having for dinner. So I love that. I love it. It's great. I think here specifically in Pitigliano, what I've noticed culturally is they make it important to spend time outside of your house with other people. And maybe it's coming from a colder country where we're inside a lot more, but it would be weird not to talk to my neighbors every day. And that was not something I did in Canada, ever. And that has enabled me to feel more at home here, to feel a part of it. I used to describe to people, you know, obviously making a big decision, a big change like this, people ask you lots, you know, how is it? Did it go okay? What do you feel now that you've spent some time there? And I say, okay, well, my happiness scale before was like here to here. And so this was the top. And now it feels like it starts here and goes, you know, who knows at this point, right? So the basis of like a bad day here is already in the top, you know, 30% of what it was before. So yes, I think my quality of life is intensely improved. Absolutely. And in ways that I did not expect. So there is the sort of, I mean, there's the language part of it, obviously feeling like you can connect with people, feeling like you can accomplish your day-to-day things, specifically if you have to do anything with documents or bureaucracy and all of the rules that come out of the woodwork that you weren't expecting. Like, oh, I didn't know that was going to expire, so now I have to go back to that office and do the whole thing again, as an example. But I think for me, the biggest thing are the cultural differences that I didn't expect. For example, like if I'm sick, I tend to want to be alone, and I would also think that most other people would sort of not want to be stressed. They would want to stay by themselves. They would want to be quiet. And yet people here, if they hear you're sick, they want to come over. They want to take care of you. They want to be with you. And that to me is, how do you say no when you're used to something else that you didn't realize you would have to decline without offending people? That one has been a big one. I don't want to upset anybody. That, and also, but maybe this is more a small town versus city, is that there is no anonymity here. You cannot wear your pajama pants to the grocery store. You can't. Like 17 people will say hello to you if you walk out the door. And that's wonderful, but it's also, when you're just not feeling up to it, it's not an option. But maybe that's a good thing, but it's definitely an adjustment. Okay, so in terms of the language being useful, I think it's essential if you're not going to live in a major center where they speak English. I also think that it's essential psychologically. If you are going to uproot your life and move to another country, integrating means understanding how people communicate on their level. And also I find it's a sign of respect. So I held it in like a really high important category that I would choose to live in a place where I was forced to learn the language. Because I knew that if I wasn't, I probably wouldn't progress very much. And so if I get a letter in the mail, I have to understand what that means for my household, for my budget, all that kind of stuff. And I have questions about it. And I want to be able to go into the community office and ask them those questions without having somebody come and hold my hand. And coming here alone, I think, is a big part of it. I think if I was with a spouse or with a family, you still feel like you have someone to communicate with, to be yourself. But being by myself, I knew that I would be lonely if I didn't know how to speak to people. And so I jumped in with both feet, and I just kept saying yes to go to every single event, yes to going to watch plays in the theater that I did not understand. I went to movies and I was like, why are there not subtitles? But it was better because I was forced. I was forced to do it, and therefore I've been here for 1.5 years, and I can now work, teach, talk to anyone, feel like I can joke with people, which is so lovely, and not offend anybody by saying something really bad. Okay, so my life day to day in Pitigliano generally consists of waking up and throwing open the curtains because I love to see the sunshine. It's very sunny here. I will probably do a load of laundry like most of us do, and then we hang it out on the line in time for the sun to come around and hit the balcony. And then coffee in the piazza every day. Every day I go up to the piazza, we sit outside. It'll be either with friends or my partner Gianluca, and we talk for, half an hour, 45 minutes. And then he will either go to work, they will go to work, go home, prepare things, and I will either go to work or take a walk, usually, because we're very close to nature here. So being able to just 5 minutes, leave the door and go and be in the forest is something that is really important. So if I'm going to work, I will be either going to the physical center here where I teach yoga, because yoga was not a big thing here, but slowly people are getting into it and really enjoying being able to learn that, which is something I feel good about being able to bring to them. Or teaching English, which of course everybody wants their children to learn English. So that's fun because I learn new Italian words from them, and we can chat a lot. And I see them improve in their homework and all those kinds of things. And then I have one more job, which is working at the local candy store. which is so much fun. Everybody, all types of people come in. We get to do like festivals, and I get to see other little towns around. People are very nice. I obviously learned more about traditional candies and candy making and things like that. And, they have a lot of festivals, a lot of holiday days here, saints' days and things. So we have a special candy for each one, and that's been lots of fun to do too.
Great.
And then, we eat. Yeah.
Right.
And then we walk some more. And then we have some Prosecco. And then we eat some more. And then I clean a little, and then I go to bed. So the practicalities of it, the pathway to get here, I think is divided into two parts. And it's something that the more I went through the process and the longer I'm here, the more I'm passionate about this aspect of it. So the two parts being the documents and the financial side. I think on the whole, most people who make this move, tend to be a little bit older than I am maybe. They tend to be in a couple or maybe looking at retirement. That is a more common way that I think people move here. But I wanted to see if it was possible for someone who was still planning to work, who didn't have a bunch of money saved up for retirement or a bunch of assets. And so I wanted to kind of prove that that was possible. So I took what little savings that I had and I reduced my lifestyle in Canada. Knowing that I was moving to another country, there was no sense in keeping things like furniture and at the end even like my car and stuff. So selling off some of my assets, moving to a place that cost a lot less, and understanding that doing that for a couple years was essential in order to have enough money to be able to handle the exchange rates, and of course being able to buy property here, which was something that was important to me. So there's that aspect of it that had to change. The document aspect of it, I had no idea at the time. Obviously, because I am a Canadian and British citizen, I knew that the British passport would probably be the easier way to go. But I didn't understand the rules behind Brexit. I didn't know what was going to happen. And it was really there that Sam and Smart Move Italy opened my eyes to what was possible. So I went to her boot camp the first 3 days, I think it was, and understood a little bit about her story of how she was able to come here, and then understood that the deadline for Brexit had not passed yet and that it would be possible for me to actually make it happen. So I got a big binder. I printed out all the pages of all the steps to do, how to eventually search for property, how to go to your consulate, documents, a list of documents that I would have to print off and understand, fees that I would have to pay. So I had to kind of get all of my ducks in an order. And then I came to Italy, and I had that family in Florence that was able to help me translate and navigate some of the systems. And they went with me to the community office there in order to get my permesso di soggiorno. And then of course that changed. We had a different one for Brits, so we had to get that done a second time. And having someone on the ground was very helpful. But none of that would have been possible without all of those steps being laid out by Smart Move Italy. And I couldn't believe that someone was offering basically an open door for me to ask any questions, for me to get all of the information that I would need and a pathway to follow in order to make it happen. So for that, I could never thank them enough. Yeah, so once I had decided that I wanted to buy a house, I understood that I was in Canada for a few more months, and I knew that I would have to find where to go and how to look at houses, how to contact realtors here, because there is no communal general system to follow. So once again, I turned to Smart Move because I knew that they had Italian realtors that you could speak to. And Sam put me in contact with two amazing people. And they were able to answer all of my questions, do all of the communication, set up a calendar for when I was coming for my trip to view all the houses, and then also do the negotiations, paperwork, and answer every single question that I had. And then eventually, once it went through, they actually came down to Pitigliano to the notary with me and celebrated with me afterwards. and helped me set up the utilities here.
Fantastic.
So it was incredible. It was incredible. And when you think about it, the cost for that it like is nothing compared to the amount of time that they save you, and obviously cost.
Right.
They save you a lot of money by giving you all of these answers. So yeah. So in terms of like cost of living, I understood that coming here would be less probably, even with the currency exchange. But I was not prepared for how much less. I think it does make a difference that I'm living in a smaller area. I think if I was living in the center of Milan or or Florence, I think it would be obviously expensive. But there are some basic things that are just not. I every time I go to the grocery store, even if I buy organic products, it is like half of what I would have paid in Canada. Half almost. And if I go to the market, it's even less and tastes great, you know. And there are we have like little caves near Pitigliano, around Pitigliano, that are turned into stores. And there are 2 caves along the roadway at the beginning of the Centro Storico that have vegetables, and they're coming, like all the citrus coming directly from Sicily. Everything is in season because they're only bringing in things that are in season, which helps me understand what to look for. And you walk away with 4 full bags of groceries for 15 euros. It's nothing. It feels like nothing, and it will feed you for a week or more. Obviously also getting food that's handmade all the time. So you're not paying that extra premium because that is just normal. But if we talk about prices for things other than food, so the price for the house, it was doable for someone like me. An artist living on that kind of living in Canada would never be able to accumulate enough to make a down payment for a home or a condo in Calgary. It wouldn't happen. You'd have to be 2 people together or more, I think. Here, I was not only able to come up with a down payment, but I was able to pay outright for this house. Now, there was some work to do. I decided to not go down the avenue of a €1 house or a very low-cost house. I wanted to be able to live in it immediately, but they included all the furniture in the price, which was amazing. It had good bones. It had spaces that I could work with. And so the first thing I did was the kitchen. And it was open already, so I didn't have to tear down any walls. But I did have to take out everything, replace all of the appliances, get in all custom cupboards made in the wood that goes here in Pitigliano, travertine tile, which is normal here, so it doesn't cost as much. And that kitchen cost me $5,000. Like crazy. I replaced all the windows and they cost me $4,000. And it's like life-changing renovations for something that you think, okay, well, I'll spend a little bit less on the house and then I have a little bit of money left over and I can make it the house of my dreams. And to think that that's even possible, I don't know that I would ever have been able to do that in Canada, ever.
Right.
And still work without, working in a job that I detest. It is, and when you think about things like private teaching of English, I'm not charging $30 an hour. I'm charging 10 or 15 because they also have to be able to pay for things that are reasonable within their budget for their salaries here. So you also have to earn in a way that's good for the community, and that can sustain me. And I admit I work several jobs, but I still work part-time. I have a lot of free time, and that is a gift. Like you can't buy time, right? So it makes a huge impact on the quality of life.
Like and subscribe for more stories on the way.